Hi, hello there. Welcome to Default Route Propagation in OSPF video demonstration. Okay, so for this video demo, we will be doing configuration of static route, default static route, and then we are going to propagate it on the OSPF network. Okay, so we will be using this topology here. Okay, so right now this has been configured already with OSPF. Okay, so let's check it. So CLI. So just to check that it has been configured with OSPF. Okay, so enable show IP route. Okay, so on OSPF, routes are already there. So we have 3 O's for router 1. Okay, so for router 2 here, let's check this one. Right, so enable show IP route. Right, so we have 2 O's here. Okay, so which are the R1 LAN and the R3 LAN. So next would be R3. So on R3 we are expecting 3 O's also. Okay, so enable show IP route. Right, so you've got 3 O's there. Okay, now what we're going to do here is we are going to assume that R2 would be our stub network. Okay, so R2 being the stub network, so that means we are going to connect this to the ISP. So let me add another router here. For instance, this will serve as our ISP here. So let me configure this. Right, so we're not yet done booting. So let me turn off this one and let's put a NIM2T here. Okay, so turn it on. So let's wait for it to boot. Right, so also we need to create another serial here. Okay, so we don't have any available serial on R2. Okay, so we are going to create or install a serial interface on R2. So let's go to R2 here. Okay, and then let's save the configuration first before we reboot this one. So you've got copy, run, start. All right, so let me turn this off. Okay, and let me add. All right, so WIC2T or NIM2T there. So turn it on. All right, so we are going to name this as ISP. So assuming that this is our ISP here. Okay, so serial connection from R2, which is our stub router. Let me use serial 020 connecting to serial 020 also here. Now assuming that this one connection here is, say the IP address here is 209.165.200.224. Okay, let's say this is /30 here. All right, okay, so say this is that one and that two there. So let me just add some note here. So this is our first, right, and this would be our last. Okay, so all right, so we would be using 209.165.200.224 on this network here. So this is 224. This would be, say this is the 225. It's not that one, the 225. All right, and this one here, say this is the 226. All right, okay, so let's configure first our R2. So since we have added a new interface here, okay, so let's configure this. So enable, start with show IP interface brief. All right, so show IP in brief. Okay, now in here, as you can see, so we have here serial 020. So we are going to use this. Let's put an IP address here. So configure terminal. So IP address, say that is 165.200.225. Okay, so 225, that's 255.255.255.252. All right. So we have not yet defined the interface. So interface serial 0/2/0 there. Okay, so IP address 209.165.200.225. Okay, 255.255.255.252. Right, and then no shutdown. Okay, so next, let's go to our ISP here. Let us assign an IP address to it. Okay, and also assign the host name. So enable, configure terminal. You've got host name. Say this is an ISP, right? So interface serial 0/2/0. So IP address. So from the topology, that is 209.165.200.226. All right. So 209.165.200.226. All right. So 255.255.255.252. And then no shutdown. Okay. So as of now, we are done with the IP assignment. So let's make some checking here. If we can ping the directly connected, yes. Okay, so these are directly connected, so it should be able to ping. All right, so the next thing to do is, basically the rule of thumb is that if you are connecting to an ISP on the CCNA level, all right, so we will be using the default static route. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we are going to configure a default static route on R2 going to our ISP, right? So to do that, that would be IP route 0.0.0.0 0.0.0.0. Okay, so the next hop IP address would be 209.165.200, right? .226. All right, so this interface here would be the next hop IP address. So 209.165.200.226. Right? Okay, so now that we have added the default route, so let's check it on the routing table of R2. So do show IP route. Right? So take note that we have a default static route in here. So all traffic, okay, will be forwarded to 209.165.200.226, which is the ISP. Okay. Now let's configure the ISP router. Okay, so in such a way that we will be doing routing going to the network. Okay, so take note that in here on our OSPF network, so we have 172.16.2.0, 10 and 30. So that means we have to summarize this so that we will be defining only one static route for 172.16.00 here /22, which is the summarized network for this tree. Okay, so also we need to summarize 1.0 and 2.0 here to 192.168.0.0, that is /22. Right? So on the ISP, we are going to define two standard static route. All right, so let's do it. So that would be IP route, the summary address for the 172 network. Okay, so let's move it here. So that would be 172.16.0.0. That is for this tree here. All right. So that would be /22. So that would be 255.255.252. All right, /22.0. Okay, and of course, the next hop IP address would be this one here, which is 209.165.200.225. So 209.165.200.225. All right. So that is our route for the 172. Also, we need to define the summary route for these two networks here. Okay. So that would be IP route 192.168.0.0. Okay. So that is 1.0/24 and 2.0/24. So summarizing it, so that would yield to /22. Okay. So this would be 255.255.252.0, also using the same next hop IP address here, 209.165.200.225. All right. So let's see the routing table for the ISP. So do show IP route. Okay, so we have two SS here. For the summary network address 172.16.00/22 and 192.168.00/22. All right. So right now, basically, if we are going to test this, only PC2 and ISP can connect. Why? We already have configured R2 and it has now a default route. So all traffic will be forwarded to the ISP. So that's why when we ping this, okay, it should be successful. All right. And then pinging it back, it should be successful. Okay. Now, if you are going to try to ping, okay, from PC1 to the ISP, it's a failure. Same thing from PC3 to ISP and vice versa. All right. So why? Because router 1 and router 3 here is not aware about the route going to the ISP. All right. Now let's go back to R1 here and let's check the routing table. So enable, configure terminal. Okay, so let's have to show IP route here. Okay. So again, if you will observe, R1 is not aware about the network, okay, of the ISP, which is 209.165.200.224/30. Same thing also with R3 here. R3 is also not aware, show IP route, that the ISP network is existing. So only R2 is aware about it. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we need to propagate the default static route that we have configured in R2. Okay, so this one, so that it can be learned by these OSPF routers here. Okay, so the command here is, okay, let's go to R2 here and let's execute it. So since we are going to propagate the default route, which is the static default route in OSPF, so we need to go to the OSPF process. All right, so that would be router OSPF. All right, 1. So in here, so we are going to type in, all right, so default information originate. Okay, now this command will propagate the default static route from R2 to the OSPF routers R1 and R3 or router 3. Let's see that. So enter. So earlier here, so take note that we don't have route going to the ISP. So let me just re-execute the command, do show IP route here. Now if you will observe, we have here an added route. Okay, so it's labeled as OE2. Okay, so that is an external route because we all know that this is a static route came from R2. Okay, so if you will observe here, this is a default route and that would be forwarded to 172.16.2.2, which is this route here. All right, so same thing with R3 earlier on before we configure the propagation default information originate on R2. This is our routing table. Now let us re-execute. Okay, show IP route here. We should be expecting also an O here. Okay, E2 or external route. Okay, so we're in the default route was propagated to an OSPF network, and that is via 1.2, which is this one here. All right. So now that we have that route on R1 and R3, so therefore we can now ping. Okay. Now let's double click this. Now this time it's successful. All right. So this is also successful. All right. So we have now a fully converged network. So this is where we configured the default static route and the static route, and then we propagated it on the OSPF network. Okay. Again, for the last time, let's ping. PC1 to ISP. All right. Successful. PC2 to ISP. And PC3 to ISP. Okay. So same thing. We are going to start with the ISP to PC1, right? ISP to PC2, and ISP to PC3. So all of those are fully connected. All right. So that's how simple it is to configure a default route propagation in OSPF version 2.